They came from nothing. Or so it seemed at first. The scanners picked them up just past the edge of the Kuiper Belt, gliding in with no heat signatures, no radio signals, no life signs. Just silence. But there were hundreds of them. Warships, monstrous jagged things that looked like they'd been built to end civilizations, not protect them. The kind of ships humanity had stopped building millennia ago, back when Earth still feared invasion. But these were older. Much older. From the bridge of the Unity Prime, Admiral Corrin stood frozen, his mouth dry, eyes locked on the display as the dark fleet slowly revealed itself. Each ship bore the same strange markings, human script, ancient and etched like scars into black alloy. No nation flag, no current language, nothing familiar except the unmistakable truth. They were human. "How long?" Corrin asked quietly. The comms officer glanced back at him, pale. "We estimate they've been in subspace drift for over 1,000,000 years, sir. Maybe more." The room fell into stunned silence. No one spoke. No one could. 1,000,000 years? That was before Earth even had interstellar travel, before the current civilizations had names. That was before the collapse, before the archives had burned, before time itself was even tracked properly. "How is that possible?" someone whispered. They didn't have an answer. The fleet had just appeared. One moment, deep space was quiet. The next, 368 warships blinked into real space from a void so dark even light avoided it. No one could detect how they entered. No wormhole signature, no FTL wake, no gravitational distortion. Just presence. Silent, ancient, and terrifying. And still they didn't respond to hails. Admiral Corrin had dealt with rogue AI, black market fleets, even the infamous Braylon uprising on Titan's moons. But this was beyond history, beyond science. These ships didn't belong to any known human empire. They predated them all. "What do we know about their tech?" Corrin asked, voice steady despite the chill in his spine. "Mostly dormant. Hulls are obsidian composite, unknown structure. Weapon ports visible but sealed. No sign of life, no AI pings. We sent drones, they didn't come back." Corrin's jaw clenched. What happened? They were disintegrated. No flash, just gone. A slow, crawling dread settled over the command deck. He turned back to the viewing screen. The largest ship, twice the size of Earth's biggest orbital station, sat in the middle of the formation like a black crown. It had no visible engines, no lights, no shields. It just floated there, waiting, watching. Then, at exactly 0400 hours, everything changed. The lead ship powered up. No fanfare, no hum, just a faint shimmer across the hull as a massive energy source flickered awake. One by one, each vessel followed. The void went from cold silence to something alive. Sensors went haywire. Systems glitched. Ships across the solar defense grid reported brief power failures, hallucinations, even bleeding noses from their crews. Whatever was waking up out there, it wasn't just hardware. It was something else. The science officer, Mira, looked up from her station, eyes wide. "Admiral?" Corrin turned. "They're broadcasting." Corrin's heart jumped. "Put it on." The speakers crackled. Then a voice, broken, metallic, like it had been waiting forever just to speak, spilled into the room. "This is Fleet Sovereign 1 of the Eternal Command. Human civilization detected. Status, confirmed. Genetic match, positive. Time elapsed, 121,453 years. Awaiting orders. Mission, reclamation of the human empire." No one moved. The air itself seemed to freeze. Corrin blinked. "Reclaim... what empire?" The voice came again, clearer this time, angrier. "You are the remnants, the broken lineage. We are the first ascendants, and we have returned to finish what we began." Admiral Corrin couldn't speak. The words echoed through the bridge like a curse. "We are the first ascendants, and we have returned to finish what we began." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even war talk. It was something colder, something more absolute, like a king returning to his broken castle after centuries, not surprised by the ruin, only disappointed. Corrin looked around the room. Every officer, every technician, even the synthetic assistants stood frozen. No one dared breathe. The silence that followed that transmission was heavier than any battle tension Corrin had ever known. The only sound was the faint hiss of oxygen being filtered through the walls. "Run a full genetic analysis," Corrin snapped suddenly, louder than he meant. "I want confirmation. Are they really human?" Mira, the science officer, swallowed and nodded. "Already did. 3 samples from low-frequency radiation scans, 1 from particle trails left in their subspace entry. All 3 match human DNA to a degree we've never seen." "How close?" "Too close. It's purer, cleaner. No drift, no artificial enhancements, no synthetic grafts. It's like looking at humanity's original template, before terraforming adaptation, before GenMod treatments. It's impossible." Corrin narrowed his eyes. Nothing's impossible anymore. But deep down, he agreed with her. This shouldn't exist, not just because of time, but because of what it meant. If this fleet was human, truly human, then the entire history of Earth was wrong. Across the galaxy, responses were already flooding in. Panic in the outer colonies, confusion on Mars. The Earth government had gone silent, as if unsure how to respond, or too terrified to speak. On the outer deck, orbital defense platforms began repositioning. Hundreds of turrets trained on the black shapes in space. Corrin could see it all on the holomap. The human military machine waking up, like a nervous child holding a knife in the dark. "They think it's an invasion," Mira said softly. Corrin didn't answer. He watched the massive ship at the center of the formation. The Sovereign 1. It hadn't moved since it broadcasted the message, just loomed there, half lit by the faint rays of a dying sun. Its surface was impossible to read. Smooth in some places, jagged in others, and covered in long, glowing veins that pulsed with blue fire. They weren't just old warships. These things were alive in ways no current technology could match. They moved like predators that didn't need to chase their prey. Just wait. The second message came 23 minutes later. "Your command structure is fractured. You are not fit to lead. By Directive Alpha 1 of the First Human Empire, sovereignty is revoked. Reclamation will begin in 72 hours. Resistance will be erased. You have been warned." This time the voice was colder. Robotic. It wasn't asking for negotiation. The bridge exploded into chaos. Officers shouted across terminals, commanding alerts, deploying drone wings, sending out emergency pings to the inner colonies. Corrin stood still, fists clenched behind his back, staring at the screen. They had 72 hours. No one knew what reclamation meant exactly, but it didn't sound peaceful. And if the rumors were true, if this really was a human fleet 1,000,000 years old, then they weren't going to wait for a debate. They were here to take back what they believed was theirs. "Get me the High Assembly," Corrin ordered. "They've gone off-grid," the comms tech replied grimly. "All signals are being funneled through blacksite channels. They've locked us out." "Cowards," Corrin thought. "They're hiding while the old gods knock on our door," Mira muttered beside him. Corrin didn't respond. He stared at the Sovereign 1. 1,000,000 years. What kind of civilization could even last that long? Humanity's recorded history only went back 25,000 years. Everything else was myth, lost in the collapse. Why now? Corin asked aloud. Why come back now? What woke them? Mira shook her head. We think it wasn't deliberate. They were in a form of deep subspace stasis, a million-year drift. But then a pulse went off last week. Something in the Perseus Rift. A dark energy surge. We think it broke the stasis field. You're saying they just woke up by accident? Not exactly. The field was designed to wake them up under a very specific condition, when humanity re-established control across multiple sectors of the Orion Arm. Corin turned to her. Wait, that's what triggered them? She nodded. We passed their benchmark 2 weeks ago. The expansion on Andros 9, the unification of the Europa Alliance, and the rebuilding of Earth's orbital fleet. All three matched the parameters. We hit the signal without knowing it. Corin laughed once, bitterly. We built ourselves into a grave. The next day, Corin joined a secret summit with the remaining Admiralty on Mars. The conversation wasn't about diplomacy. It was about defense. We have no idea what these things are capable of, said General Ava Rez, who ran the orbital command for Mars. They fried our best drones without even firing a shot. They've ignored every transmission, and we've confirmed they have energy readings exceeding anything we've ever recorded. Then we hit them first, growled Admiral Harrow, the oldest of them all. Surprise strike. Take out their core ship before they can act. Corin shook his head. That's suicide. You think they sent a message like that without expecting us to hit back? You hit that fleet, they'll wipe us out. We can't let them dictate the terms. We already lost the initiative. They've been planning this for 1,000,000 years. You think they don't have counters for every play? Silence fell again. In the shadows, someone finally asked the question no one wanted to voice. What if we were never the first humans out here? Corin looked up slowly. The speaker was a civilian strategist, young, nervous, not someone the admirals respected. But his words hit like a weapon. What if, he continued, we're the broken copy? What if these people out there, they're the original, the ones who ruled before the collapse? No one answered. But deep inside, every person in that room knew the truth. Their history was a lie. The collapse hadn't been the end of the first human age. It had been a reset, a cosmic amnesia, and now the forgotten kings had returned. Back aboard the Unity Prime, Corin sat alone in his quarters. He rewatched the transmission again. The voice, the phrasing, the language, not just old. It was perfect. No emotional weight, no waste. Like it had been trained out of them. It wasn't just a war fleet. It was a civilization on ice. A 1,000,000-year time capsule of a humanity that had achieved something godlike and then vanished without explanation. And now they wanted it all back. He stared at the words again. You are the remnants, the broken lineage. It burned. Whatever they were, whatever they believed they were, they thought the humans of today were inferior. Mistakes. Broken echoes. Corin stood and crossed the room to his comms. Bring me a line to every capital on Earth. Unfiltered. I don't care who I have to override. I'm giving a broadcast. The aide on the other end paused. Sir, what message do you want to send? Corin stared into the void beyond his window, where the black shapes of the ancient ships still hovered in silence. I want every human, on every planet, every moon, every station, to hear the truth. He took a breath. Tell them, the gods have returned, and they are us, but older, colder, and convinced we're not worthy. He paused again. Then tell them this, we may be broken, but we are not done. They called them Ascendants now. The name spread like fire across every news network, colony whisper chain, military channel, and back-alley syndicate. It wasn't official. It wasn't in any military report. But it stuck, because nothing else captured what they were. Not just ancient, not just human, but something above them. Above all of them. Human, but better, colder, purer, unforgiving. As Earth's orbital night sank over the Western Hemisphere, every major capital sat under curfew. Every station ran drills. Civilian transports were grounded. The Mars colonies froze all outbound traffic. And the Lunar Guard, a unit that hadn't been deployed in 300 years, began waking up war machines that most engineers didn't even recognize anymore. But deep in orbit, aboard the Unity Prime, Admiral Corrin knew none of it would matter if they didn't understand what they were truly facing. They had 72 hours. Now just 48 remained. And in that time, they had to piece together 1,000,000 years of forgotten history. "Anything from the Sovereign One?" Corrin asked. Mira shook her head, arms crossed tightly over her uniform. "Nothing new. No further messages. No movement. But there's something else." He looked at her. "What?" She hesitated. "We were running deep spectrum analysis on their main hull, looking for any signs of onboard life, AI movement, anything. We didn't get that. But we found something else embedded in their signal protocols." She handed him a data slate. Corrin scanned it. The numbers made no sense at first. Random encryption? "They're sending a passive code constantly," she explained. "It's broadcasting on a loop, low frequency, subspace pitched, almost like a heartbeat." Corrin frowned. "A beacon?" "Not quite. More like a claim. It's like they're tagging this sector. Broadcasting ownership." Ownership. Corrin didn't like the sound of that. "They're not here to open negotiations," he muttered. "They're here to reclaim." "Yes," Mira said, "and they think they have the right to." The thing was, from what she'd found, maybe they did. In the lower decks, beyond the bridge, and away from prying ears, Mira and her science team had converted a side chamber into a temporary historical lab. Holograms floated in the air, planetary systems, half-translated archives, fragmented genetic models, and in the middle of it all, suspended by gravity coils, floated the black tablet. Not an actual tablet, of course, but that's what they'd started calling it. The fragment had come from one of the Ascendant Fleet's outer ships, a sliver of metal no larger than a human hand, retrieved by a rogue drone before it was disintegrated. At first it looked like scrap, but then they cracked its energy signature, and it unfolded. The inside was full of stars, mapped constellations, some no longer visible, others long since collapsed into black holes. And within them, names, symbols, coordinates. They weren't just maps. They were claims. The Ascendants had been everywhere. Systems humanity thought it had discovered were listed here as territories already. Entire clusters marked with red sigils, some even labeled in an ancient human script that Mira's AI still couldn't fully translate. Corrin stared at it all, eyes wide. "This isn't a fleet," he whispered. "It's a return." Mira nodded. "They ruled before us, Admiral. All of us. These records predate anything we've ever found. Their empire spanned thousands of systems, and then it vanished, like it never existed." "Why?" She hesitated. "We think they did it on purpose." Corrin blinked. "You mean they erased themselves?" "Not just themselves," Mira said, voice hushed. "They erased their entire history. The collapse wasn't natural, sir. It wasn't war or disaster. It was a reset, a system-wide memory purge across human space. The Ascendants scrubbed everything clean, burned the records, dismantled the infrastructure, turned thriving colonies into empty ruins." Corrin struggled to speak. "Why would they do that?" She turned to face him fully. Because something went wrong. We found fragments in the code, mentions of a cycle protocol, and a phrase that keeps repeating in their archives. What phrase? Mira's voice dropped to a whisper. Humanity must forget to survive. 42 hours to go. The Ascendant fleet still hadn't moved, but Earth had. Hundreds of ships formed a loose ring around the inner system. Defense nets reactivated. AI constructs older than most governments were brought back online. It was the largest human mobilization since the Titan riots. But even then, it didn't feel like enough. In a hidden hangar orbiting Europa, Corin met with a specialist. She wasn't military, not anymore. Her name was Lynn, no title, no rank, just Lynn. And she had once led the Deep Cold Project, an off-books dig into humanity's most ancient myths, before it was shut down by the Assembly. You're early, she said, stepping out from behind a glowing console. Corin didn't smile. You're my last option. Lynn raised an eyebrow. That bad? They're older than everything, and they think we're children playing in their ruins. Lynn glanced at the hollows. So the dead came back. No, Corin said quietly. They were never dead, just sleeping. She walked past him and gestured at a file floating in the air. I warned them this might happen. 1,000,000 years is long enough for memory to rot, but some things leave scars in the bones of civilization. She tapped the console. The image shifted. A face appeared. Human. Almost. The bone structure was finer, the eyes deeper, the skull slightly larger, skin like marble, white as a dying star. Hairless, ageless, an ascendant. We recovered this from a crashed probe on Tantalus 3, Lynn said, buried beneath 30 meters of crystal. The genetic profile matches your current fleet. Corin stared at the face. They look like us. Lynn shook her head. No, we look like them. She paused. And you want to know the worst part? Corin nodded once. They didn't evolve like this. They engineered it. 1,000 generations of selective breeding, cybernetic enhancement, neural compression. They took humanity and carved away everything they considered weak. Fear, emotion, compassion. Why? Lynn gave him a cold smile. To make us fit to rule a galaxy. 37 hours. The Ascendants moved, only slightly, just a few ships repositioning. But it was enough. Enough to trigger alarms across every fleet. Fighters scrambled, drones deployed, weapons powered. But the Sovereign One simply hovered closer. Closer to Earth. Closer to them. Corin stood on the bridge again, watching as the ship's shadow stretched across the screen like a god's hand reaching down from the stars. They're scanning us, Mira said. Deep pulse, penetrating every surface, like they're looking for something. Tell me they're not hacking our systems. Not yet, but I don't think they need to. Corin's stomach twisted. You think they've seen us before? I think they made us. That word again. Made. Like the entire species had been handcrafted, not born. The Sovereign One lit up again, this time brighter than before. A pulse of blue light rippled across its hull, shooting out into space like a signal flare. Corin turned toward the speaker console, already expecting the voice. We have reviewed your archives. Your development has stagnated. You are fractured, inefficient, consumed by internal conflict. This trajectory leads only to extinction. We will correct it. The lights dimmed slightly. Sparks danced across the panels. Your resistance is noted. Your courage is admirable. But your future is no longer yours to decide. The message ended. Mira's hands trembled. They're going to wipe us out. Corin's jaw clenched. Not if we hit them first. He called an emergency session. Bypassed the assembly. Bypassed the Earth Command. He had no time left for red tape and weak spines. All captains, all fleets. I'm issuing a system-wide broadcast. His voice rang out through every human-controlled channel. This is Admiral Corrin, commanding officer of the Unity Prime. You've all heard the messages. You've seen the fleet. These aren't aliens. They aren't invaders. They are us, from a past we were never supposed to remember. And they have come to take back what they think is theirs. But let me be clear. We don't owe them anything. We built this future. We bled for every inch of it. They may be older, stronger, smarter, but they forgot something along the way. We're human. And when we fight for something we love, we don't stop. He paused. You have 36 hours to prepare. When the sky burns, make sure they know one thing before they go back to whatever hell they crawled from. That we are not the past. We are the future. 35 hours. That was all they had left. Corrin hadn't slept in almost 2 days. He'd paced the bridge, reviewed ship formation after formation, skimmed over tactical reports and fleet movements, but none of it gave him peace. You couldn't prepare for ghosts, not ones that looked like you, bled like you, and still called themselves your ancestors. They'd built war fleets before. Humanity had fought invasions, rogue AIs, even internal collapses. But this wasn't a battle they could understand yet. The Ascendants weren't here to destroy cities. They were here to overwrite a species. And in the quiet moments, Corrin began to wonder if they were wrong to resist, if they were, in some way, the mistake. Mira entered his quarters unannounced, face pale and drawn. "They've made contact," she said. He stood instantly. "Another transmission?" "No," she said slowly. "A direct message. Personal." She handed him a slate. A simple line of code ran across it, then a phrase. "You, Corrin. You carry her blood." He stared at it, confused. "Her? Who?" "We don't know," Mira said. "But they called you by name. They accessed sealed files, your ancestry chain going back over 500 generations. Somehow they pulled it, and they found something." Corrin frowned. "What are they implying?" Mira hesitated, then tapped the screen. It lit up again, this time with a name, Amaritha Sol. Corrin blinked. "Never heard of her." "You wouldn't. She lived roughly 9 to 80,000 years ago. The DNA is fragmented, but the match is strong. She was a high genetic architect, one of the first Ascendant mothers." Corrin's breath caught. "You're saying I'm descended from... She might have designed the original Ascendant genome, and now they've found you. They think you're important." Corrin's mind reeled. "They want me to surrender?" Mira shook her head. "No, Admiral. They want to talk to you." The meeting was set aboard a neutral ship, an old diplomatic carrier known as the Heliarch. It hadn't seen use in over a century, and it was meant for peacetime conferences, not meetings with post-human demigods. The Ascendants sent only one envoy. She arrived in a spherical transport that seemed to fold itself out of subspace. No visible engines, no wake, no sound. Just an impossible sphere of gravity and silence, parked calmly in the middle of the void. She stepped out without armor, without weapons. And yet, Corrin had never felt so threatened in his life. She was tall, not freakishly so, but enough to seem out of place among the crew. Her features were almost perfectly symmetrical, her skin pale and flawless, her hair a sheet of silver white that shimmered like liquid metal. But it was her eyes that haunted him. They weren't eyes made for emotion. They were made to see and never forget. "I am Lyra Sol," she said. Her voice echoed, not in volume, but in memory, like it had been heard before, long ago. Corrin stood his ground. "I'm Admiral Corrin, representing the United Systems of Humanity." Lyra studied him for a moment. not with curiosity, but with familiarity. "You bear her blood," she said quietly. "That is why we spared your ship." Corin's jaw tightened. "I don't need favors. If you came for surrender, you'll leave disappointed." "Surrender?" Lyra tilted her head slightly. "No. You misunderstand. We came to fulfill a promise." Corin stepped closer. "What promise?" "That we would return when the cycle was complete," she said, "when humanity reclaimed the stars, and we would guide you back to unity." "Unity?" Corin laughed once. "By burning everything we've built?" Lyra didn't blink. "Your unity is false. You squabble over planets, languages, borders. You modify your DNA without understanding the roots. You teach lies about history. You corrupt the mind with distraction, emotion, conflict." She looked past him. "You are the children of fire. We are here to lead you back to purpose." "No," Corin said quietly. "You're here to take control." "Of course," she said. "What else would parents do with wayward children?" After the meeting, Corin sat in silence. The envoy had left. No threats, no weapons drawn. No ultimatums, just a calm, eerie confidence they would reclaim, because to them it was already decided. The worst part? She believed it. She didn't hate humans. She didn't want revenge. She wasn't cruel. She was simply certain that humanity had lost its way, that everything since their disappearance had been a flawed simulation of progress, and to fix it, the original architects had to return. Mira joined him again, dragging a chair beside his console. "You okay?" Corin didn't answer at first. "She didn't blink," he finally said. "She didn't even flinch when I told her we'd fight." "She didn't think you could win," Mira said. He looked at her. "You agree with her?" "I think—" "She's not lying," Mira said. "I think they really believe they're saving us. The question is, saving us into what?" Corin exhaled. Then, from across the room, the alarms blared. Not weapons fire, boarding protocols. All outer decks lit up red. Auto-defense drones deployed. Pulse fields shimmered across hallways, but nothing breached. Then a message appeared on every screen, every panel, every personal device across the fleet. A single line. "Witness the truth." Corin ran to the console. "What the hell is this?" Mira was already on it. "They've penetrated the internal AR net. Not hacking, just inserting." Then came the vision. A full sensory override. Every crew member, every officer, every civilian. Suddenly they saw it. A galaxy aflame, not in war, but in brilliance. Ships the size of moons, cities grown organically into the rings of planets, humans walking through artificial suns. A golden empire, no poverty, no illness, no war, only order, only unity. And then, the collapse, not by force, but by choice. The vision turned darker. Massive councils of ascendants debating the cycle, fears of stagnation, genetic decay, evolutionary bottlenecks, a decision to erase themselves, to let humanity fall and rise again naturally, stronger, better, purged of arrogance. The collapse wasn't a disaster, it was a lesson. And now that humanity had climbed back into the stars, the teachers had returned. The vision ended, and silence followed. Corin stood in the middle of the bridge, shaking. "They didn't fall," he whispered. "They left." Mira looked pale. "And now they've come to finish the test." Corin turned to the fleet comms. He opened a private line, not for governments, not for diplomats, but for the fighters. "To all captains, commanders, and crews of the human fleets, you've just seen what they wanted you to see. Their vision, their version of order. But don't mistake beauty for freedom. Don't confuse perfection with peace." He stepped forward, voice rising. "They want to overwrite us, to remake humanity in their image. But I say this. We were never meant to follow ghosts. We were never meant to be ruled by statues from the past. We fight. We argue. We feel. We fall. We climb back up again. That's not failure. That's being human. He looked toward Earth, a tiny dot in the dark. They think we are fractured. I say we are diverse. They think we are weak. I say we are free. And if they want to drag us back into the cage they built, they'll have to come through all of us first. He cut the feed. 30 hours left. On the edge of the system, the Ascendant fleet began to move. All ships activated simultaneously. No formation, no staggered response. Like a single being waking from sleep. Weapons powered silently, shields lit like auroras. And for the first time, the human fleet saw the full scope of what was coming. Not just ships, not just power, but conviction. An ancient empire, risen from the ashes, determined to reclaim its children. Corin stood on the bridge, watching as the shadows grew closer. He didn't flinch. "We hold the line," he said, "even if it breaks us." And in the silence before war, the stars themselves seemed to wait. The Ascendants didn't fire first. They didn't have to. They just moved, and the universe trembled. 30 ships broke off from the Sovereign One's formation, their hulls pulsing with light that didn't behave like human-made technology. It wasn't energy. It was something deeper, woven into the fabric of space, like gravity obeyed them now. Across the human defense ring, captains reported sensor failure, AI confusion, target drift. "They're jamming us," one officer shouted. "No, worse," Mira muttered on the Unity Prime's bridge, her face drawn and pale. "They're bending local space. Our weapons can't lock onto a target because the target isn't staying where it should be. It's moving faster than light's own prediction curve." Admiral Corin stood at the command deck, fists clenched behind his back, voice tight with focus. "They want us to panic." Some of the younger officers already were. Fleet signals were crossing. Units were drifting from formation. It was like trying to fight an enemy you couldn't touch, one that moved through the cracks of reality. But Corin didn't flinch. "Hold formation," he barked. "Let them make the first mistake." The Unity Prime floated at the center of the human fleet like a lighthouse, its massive engines idling, every gun turret trained on the black, angular vessels cutting through space like sharks in deep water. Then came the first strike. It wasn't a laser or missile. It was a wave, a ripple of distorted light and sound that passed silently through space until it hit. 3 human cruisers blinked out. Gone. No explosion, no debris, no emergency signals. Just absence, like they'd never existed at all. "They erased them," Mira whispered. "No," Corin said. "They displaced them. Find out where." But he already knew they wouldn't. Those ships had been sent somewhere else, maybe into deep space, maybe into death, maybe into nothing. He looked at the screen. "They're not here to win a war. They're here to prove we shouldn't even fight it." The bridge lit up red. More ships incoming. The Sovereign One had yet to fire. But the others were circling now, forming an enormous helix pattern around the fleet. It was beautiful, coordinated, like a dance written by a god. Corin turned toward his communications officer. "Patch me through to all fleet commanders." He waited for the green light. "Do not chase them. Do not break formation. They're baiting us into chaos." Static. Then a voice replied, "With respect, Admiral, what do you want us to do?" Corin's voice didn't waver. "We stay together. We focus on their smallest ships, make them bleed. Remind them we're still here." Across the formation, weapons lit up. Rail cannons, plasma turrets, kinetic spears, fusion missiles. They roared into the dark, and for the first time, they struck. One of the Ascendant cruisers was caught mid-curve, its shimmering cloak failing just long enough for 3 direct hits. It didn't explode. It shattered, like crystal under pressure. Fragments floated in space, trailing glowing dust. The bridge of the Unity Prime erupted in cheers. Corin didn't smile. We hit one. That means they're not gods. But victory always comes at a cost. The Ascendants adapted fast. Within minutes, they changed tactics. Their ships stopped curving. Now they advanced directly, forming spears of pure velocity. Whatever shields they used had no flicker, no field, just resilience. Human weapons bounced off most of them like paper darts. And then they responded in kind. A single lance of white energy ripped through Sector 7. 6 ships vaporized. The carrier Hopefire collapsed in on itself, its artificial gravity core-folding space into a tiny black flash that swallowed all hands. Corin heard the scream over the open comms. He shut it off. "We're being cut apart," Mira whispered. "We can't keep this up." Corin didn't answer her. He couldn't. His mind was elsewhere, not on tactics, but on her. Lyra Soul. She'd told him this would happen, not with arrogance, but certainty. This wasn't war. This was correction. "Sir," Mira said again, this time more urgently. "There's something else." He turned. "One of the Ascendant ships, Sector 3. It's sending a distress signal." He blinked. "What?" "Human readable. Emergency frequency. Old code, but it's real. Get me visual." The screen shifted. An Ascendant vessel, smaller than the others, was spinning slowly, trailing dark smoke. The hull had been torn open in 3 places, and strange sparks were leaking from inside like lightning trying to escape a cage. "They're alive in there," Mira said. And for the first time, Corin saw it, the crack in the Ascendant perfection. They moved fast, a small boarding team, 2 transports, 1 heavily armed. The Ascendant ship was barely holding together, drifting like a wounded animal in the middle of chaos. The other Ascendant vessels ignored it. That surprised Corin. They're not protecting their own. "Because weakness isn't part of their design," Mira muttered. "It's not worth saving." The boarding party breached the outer hull easily, no resistance, no traps. And then they found her. A single Ascendant, half her face gone. Blood, dark and silvery, smeared across her armor, her breathing ragged. She stared at them as they entered, her lips curled in disgust, not fear. She tried to lift a weapon. Corin stepped forward. "Don't," he said softly. She hesitated. Collapsed. They restrained her carefully, sedated, hooked her into medbay equipment. But even unconscious, she spoke. One word, again and again, in a whisper like a broken song. "Fracture." Back on the Unity Prime, Corin stood outside the medbay with Mira, staring at the unconscious form of their prisoner. "She's young," Mira said. "Not fully matured. Likely a lower caste." Corin nodded. "Maybe that's why she cracked." Mira tapped her tablet. "We scanned her implants. She's not pure. She has conflict in her neural patterns." "Emotion?" "Yes. They tried to remove it, but she fought back. She wanted to feel." Corin turned to the window, watching the battle beyond. Thousands dying, ships colliding, history burning. She's the first Ascendant I've seen with a soul. 20 hours left. The battle still raged, losses on both sides. More human than Ascendant, but not as one-sided as expected. And everywhere, signs of imperfection. 2 more Ascendant ships had fallen. 1 detonated from within. Suicide or rebellion? Mira came to him with more data. Intercepted messages between their fleet. Content? "They're arguing about whether we deserve total correction." Corin's eyes narrowed. "They're fracturing." Corin made a decision. He opened the ship's global channel and spoke. To the Ascendant Fleet, I am Admiral Corin. We've fought you. We've lost lives. So have you. But I've seen one of your own. She didn't want your perfection. She wanted choice. You call us broken. But we are only broken because we can be whole in ways you forgot. He paused. You left to protect the future, but the future didn't ask for your chains. It asks for freedom. Silence. Then one of the Ascendant ships broke formation and opened fire, not on the human fleet, but on its own, a schism. Corin stared, stunned. The fractured ones. They were inside the fleet all along, waiting, hiding, and now they chose humanity. It began with a single act of betrayal. One Ascendant vessel, sleek, black, and trailing fractures across its curved hull, turned its weapons on another. A searing beam of light ripped across the void, striking its twin through the spine. No warning, no hesitation. The damaged vessel cracked in two, silent fire spilling from its ruptured hull like blood from a slit throat. On the Unity Prime, Corin watched the explosion in stunned silence. They're turning on each other, Mira said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Corin said nothing at first. He didn't want to believe it. But there it was, clear as day on the tactical holomap. 24 red markers, formerly Ascendant ships, now lit in a pulsing gold. I've seen that symbol before, Mira said, pointing. In the fractured envoy's neural data, it's a rebellion crest, a mark used by a sect that was purged over 900,000 years ago. A rebellion? Corin turned to her. You're telling me they've had resistance inside their perfect empire all this time? Not just resistance, she said. Memory. The rebel faction moved fast. They didn't act like diplomats. They weren't asking for peace. They were fighting to survive. 5 Ascendant warships turned on their own, launching spatial rift bombs, an ancient weapon thought to be myth. One blinked in and out of real space so violently that 3 nearby ships were torn in half, their hulls twisted like melted plastic. The Loyalist Ascendants retaliated without pause, and just like that, the void became a civil war. Ships moved like wild stars. Energy blasts lanced through silent space. Tactical AIs, human and Ascendant alike, scrambled to keep up with the chaos. For every one rebel ship, 5 Loyalists fought to contain them. But the rebels had something their enemies didn't. Desperation. Corin stood on the bridge of the Unity Prime, watching the Ascendant Empire collapse from within. He turned to Mira. Get me a channel to the rebelling ship's leader. We don't have a direct line, she said. But we might have a workaround. She ran a few commands and patched into the neural feed from the captured rebel in the medbay. The sedated Ascendant twitched on her bed, lips moving as static poured into the speakers. Then it sharpened. A voice came through. A man's voice, cold, focused, but human. Corin. Corin froze. Who is this? I am Nail Orin, former architect of the 6th Neural Chamber, current commander of the dissenting fleet. You understand now, don't you? We are not united. We never were. Corin stepped closer. Why come to us? You could have fought this war in silence. Because silence is what they demand. We chose to remember, to feel. And for that, we've been hunted for 1,000,000 years. You fight for survival? No, the voice said. We fight for freedom. Like you. Corin's chest tightened. He turned to Mira. Are we receiving telemetry from their fleet? She nodded. They've marked themselves. We can distinguish friend from foe. Then send the signal. Sir. Tell them, Corin said, voice steady. If they fight the Loyalists, they'll have our guns at their side. For the first time in 1,000 millennia, humans and Ascendants fought together, side by side. A rebel ascendant dreadnought plunged into enemy ranks, shielding a human destroyer from a volley of spatial charges. In return, the destroyer launched a kinetic salvo into the exposed side of a loyalist carrier, blowing out its core. Mira watched it all unfold with a strange look in her eyes. "We're rewriting the future," she whispered. Corrin didn't answer. He was watching the Sovereign One. It hadn't moved. Not once. The rest of the fleet was tearing itself apart, and yet the flagship, the ancient heart of ascendant civilization, just drifted in the dark, observing, until now. It turned, very slowly, very deliberately, and pointed itself toward Earth. The Sovereign One began to glow. Every sensor lit up red. "This is it," Mira said. "They're making their move." Corrin looked over at Tactical. "Estimate their weapon signature." "They're charging something massive," came the report. "Not a beam, not a missile. Something core level. It's like they're preparing to—" The officer stopped mid-sentence, then said what none of them wanted to hear. "Sir, they're preparing to rewrite the planet." It was possible. Mira had suspected it before but hadn't wanted to believe it. Ascendant technology didn't always kill. It reprogrammed whole environments, ecosystems, even sentient minds. Corrin turned pale. "They're not going to destroy Earth. They're going to make it theirs." Across the fleet, rebel and human commanders scrambled to act. Nail Oren's voice returned on the line. "They've triggered the Omega Root Protocol. It's a full neural rewrite field. Everything biological will be recalibrated to the original genome. The human race will be reduced to pre-awakened stock. No memory, no will, just docile rebuilding tools." Corrin's heart sank. "How do we stop it?" "You don't," Nail said grimly. "But we can. There's a flaw in the Sovereign's core, a weakness we designed into it long ago, a way to shut it down from within." Corrin stepped forward. "You're saying someone has to board it?" "Not someone. You." Corrin froze. "What?" "You carry Amaritha's bloodline. The Sovereign's security protocols will allow you access. The system still recognizes her DNA. You are the last genetic key." Corrin looked at Mira. She nodded, her face pale but determined. "They're right. We ran the sequencing. If the Sovereign has any safeguards built on lineage, you're it." An hour later, the plan was in motion. Corrin stood in the drop bay of the Unity Prime, suiting up. Mira approached, helmet in hand. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes," Corrin replied, locking the final seal. "I do." She reached for his hand. For a moment, neither of them were officers, just people. "You make it back," she said, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I will," Corrin said, then added with a bitter smile, "We've come too far to bow now." The shuttle was fast, quiet, and shielded by Nail's rebel fleet. They opened a corridor straight to the Sovereign One, blasting apart 3 loyalist ships that tried to intercept. Corrin's shuttle passed through the Sovereign's outer skin like water. No alarms, no resistance. Inside, silence. The halls were black, seamless, lit only by a faint bioluminescent pulse running along the walls. He moved cautiously, guided by Nail's AI. Then, at the core of the ship, he found it. A glowing sphere, 10 meters wide, suspended above a chamber that hummed with ancient power. The heart of the Sovereign. And in front of it, Lyra Sol. Alive. Waiting. She turned as he entered, her face unreadable. "You came," she said. "I had to." She stepped aside. "You're the last key. You can end this, or you can join it." Corrin stepped closer. "What happened to you?" he asked. "You were human once." I still am, she said softly. But I no longer suffer for it. He stared at the core. The world out there, it's messy, broken, alive. You want to kill all of that. You want perfection. I want peace, she said. You want control. Silence. Then Corin raised his hand. The core responded. A glow rippled across his skin, matching its pulse. And then he plunged his hand into the interface. The room went white. Outside, the Sovereign shuddered. The beam charging toward Earth sputtered. Every ship stopped. And then, across the system, a new signal rang out. A shutdown. The Omega Protocol was cancelled, the Sovereign powered down, and for the first time in 1,000,000 years, the war ended. Back on the Unity Prime, Mira watched the monitors, breath caught in her throat. When the shuttle returned, when its dock doors opened, she ran, and when Corin stepped out, limping, burnt, bloodied, but alive, she threw her arms around him without hesitation. You stopped them, she whispered. Corin nodded once, exhausted. No, he said, we did. The war ended without a treaty. There were no ceremonies, no grand declarations, no galaxy-wide broadcasts. Just silence, the kind that came after too much blood had been spilled to celebrate anything. The Sovereign One powered down, its core dimmed, its pulse gone cold. For the first time in 1,000,000 years, the last pure relic of the first human empire stood dormant. Like a titan asleep on a battlefield built by its own children. Admiral Corin stood in the observation deck of Unity Prime, staring out at the twisted wreckage floating through space. Ascendant warships, loyalist and rebel alike, drifted like broken teeth. Human ships burned quietly in the dark. The system was littered with reminders that perfection was never peace. You should be resting, Mira said from behind him, her voice soft. Corin didn't turn around. I sleep, I see them. Mira stepped beside him, her eyes tired. The ones we lost? He nodded. And the ones who didn't choose. They both knew what he meant. Some of the loyalist ascendants hadn't rebelled, but they hadn't fought either. They'd simply stopped, powered down mid-battle, ships left to drift, engines cold. It was as if, when the Sovereign was disabled, they had lost the only directive they'd ever known. No orders, no war, no purpose. 2 weeks passed. The solar system remained on high alert. Earth's skies stayed full of satellites and orbital cannons. Mars remained locked down. The moon's shadow was cast over the debris fields of ascendant wreckage. Every defense system remained live, watching the stars. But no new ascendant fleet came. There were no reinforcements, no new wave. Whatever the first empire had been, it was gone. And now all that remained was the truth buried within its memory. Corin met again with Nail Orin, the rebel commander. This time, face to face, not through holograms or subspace filters. The meeting took place in a secure station hovering just beyond Saturn's rings, where the rebel ascendants had made a temporary home. It was a stark room. Metal walls, no chairs, just the two of them standing. You saved your people, Nael said. Corin didn't answer right away. No, we survived them. That's not the same. Nael studied him with eyes that no longer glowed like the others. Since disconnecting from the Sovereign's protocols, he had changed. He looked more human now, less sharp, more tired. It's over, Nael said. The old empire is finished. Corin turned to him slowly. Then tell me why we're still watching the skies. Nael didn't answer, so Corin stepped closer. Don't lie. You know something. You didn't just rebel because of ideology. You were running from something. What was it? Nael's silence spoke volumes. Finally, he said, There's a vault, deep within the Sovereign's core. Even we couldn't open it. Not without triggering a full cascade wipe. It's older than everything else, buried in the base layers of the Ascendant mind. Corin narrowed his eyes. What's in it? Nale looked away. We called it the Origin Seed. The Unity Prime returned to the Sovereign One within 12 hours, escorted by 6 human warships and 3 rebel Ascendant cruisers. The mission was clear. Breach the vault. Discover what the Ascendants buried even from themselves. The Sovereign's halls remained silent. No defense systems. No AI voice. The body was intact, but the mind was absent. The team moved carefully. Mira walked beside Corin, her tablet scanning constantly. "We're in," she said finally. "The chamber's just ahead." The doors were unlike anything else in the ship. Smooth, seamless, black as the void. No seams, no markings. But when Corin stepped forward, it responded. His DNA still registered. The walls pulsed once, then split open. Inside, the chamber wasn't technological. It was biological, a vast sphere of living material, pulsing veins, a dome lined with threads of light and heat. And in the center, a pod, roughly human-shaped, suspended in a column of liquid. The room felt alive. Corin stared at the pod. Mira whispered, "It's not a person, it's a recording, genetic, neural, experiential, everything about a single being, encoded into living matter." Corin stepped closer. "Who?" Then the pod lit up and spoke. The voice was female, calm, measured, familiar. "This is Amarithus Sol, architect of the Ascendant genome, commander of the last generation. If you are hearing this, then the cycle has failed." Corin's heart nearly stopped. His blood. His ancestor. "You were not meant to find this," she said. "But if you have, it means the Sovereign Protocol was broken. The universe is not what we hoped, and the experiment we called humanity has persisted beyond prediction." Mira stared in horror. Corin couldn't move. "You were not our first attempt, not our second. You are the 17th iteration of sentient biological intelligence. We erased the others." The room dropped 10 degrees colder. Each time, we sought perfection, a species without hate, without chaos. Each time, we failed. You are our final failure, and yet, our greatest hope. We gave you free will. We buried our history. We turned off the lights and left the door open, and you climbed out on your own. Corin swallowed. Amarith continued. "If you've come this far, then you are no longer our children. You are your own. You must choose, rebuild the Empire, or burn it." The voice stopped. The chamber dimmed. For a long time, no one spoke. Corin turned away from the pod, his voice hoarse. "They created us, to be better. And when we weren't, they tried again." Mira touched the wall gently, as if it might remember her. "They gave us 1,000,000 years of silence, and still we crawled back to the stars." Corin looked up. "Do you believe her?" Mira turned. "Does it matter?" She believed it. Back aboard the Unity Prime, Corin stood before the Fleet Council. Some wanted to destroy the Sovereign. Some wanted to strip it. Others, fearing what it might trigger, demanded it be sealed forever. Corin listened to every argument. But when it was his turn, he said only one thing. "We leave it." Shock, protests, but he didn't waver. Let it drift, let it rot, let it become a myth again. He stepped down. If they come back, if something worse ever follows, we'll remember this day. And so they did. The Sovereign One was left to drift, powerless, silent, waiting. But Earth remembered, the stars remembered, and Admiral Corin, he carried the memory like a scar. Not of war, but of origin, because in the end humanity wasn't a miracle. It was a choice, made again and again, even when it shouldn't have survived. The Sovereign One drifted in silence now. 1,000,000 years of purpose, and now it was just a shell, a god turned into a grave. Humanity didn't celebrate its victory. There were no parades, no grand announcements. How could there be? They hadn't defeated an enemy. They had survived their creators. And in that survival, there was no triumph. Only a question. What now? Admiral Corrin sat alone in his quarters aboard the Unity Prime. The walls were dim, screens dark. The stars outside blinked in silence. His hands were bandaged. His uniform still stained from the Sovereign's inner chamber. He hadn't changed it. Not yet. He stared at the data core resting on the table, a tiny black cube no larger than his palm. It pulsed faintly, holding the final memory of Amaritha Sol, his ancient bloodline. She had left him more than a message. She had left him a choice. If he activated the cube's deeper layer, he could access the original Ascendant design. Everything the First Empire had created, perfected, learned, encoded. Blueprints for godhood. He could rebuild their empire from scratch. He could guide humanity toward their old destiny. But every time his fingers brushed the cube, he hesitated. Because somewhere deep inside, a voice kept asking, "Do you want to become them?" Mira joined him without knocking. She never knocked anymore. She walked in, glanced at the cube, then sat opposite him, resting her elbows on the table. "You haven't touched it." "I have," Corrin said. "A few times." "And?" He looked at her. "It scares me." She smiled sadly. "That means you're still human." They sat in silence for a while. The hum of the engines filled the room like a quiet heartbeat. Then she asked the question they had both been avoiding. "What happens now?" Corrin leaned back. "I've been thinking about that." A week later, the assembly was called. Not in secrecy, not in shadow, but in full. Every planetary representative, every fleet leader, every colony voice. All of them gathered via real-time holographic link. Even Nail Orin, representing the rebel ascendants, was granted a seat. Distant, cautious, but present. Corrin stood in the center of the massive orbital hall, the cube still in his hand. "I stand before you," he said. "Not as a commander, but as a result." He raised the cube slightly. "This contains everything. Their technology, their philosophy, their power. The core of the Ascendant genome. The path they built and erased for over 1,000,000 years." He looked around at the gathered leaders. "They believed they were perfect, that we were failures, but we survived them. Not with strength, not with precision, but with chaos, with stubbornness, with grief, with choice." He set the cube down on the platform. "I'm giving it to you, not as a weapon, not as a blueprint, but as a mirror. Study it, learn from it, but never let it decide for us." He paused. "We don't rebuild their empire. We build our own." Earth agreed. Mars agreed. Even the distant colonies that had long abandoned central authority agreed. For the first time in centuries, humanity was united, not under fear, not under dominance, but under truth. They began to share more openly. Military secrets, genetic data, cultural records. The shame of the collapse was replaced by the curiosity of rediscovery. The First Empire was studied, but not worshipped. The Ascendant rebels, stripped of their command protocols, began integrating slowly. Not as gods, not as leaders, but as people learning how to live among the chaos they were once told to destroy. Nail Orin took up a post on Europa, helping humanity understand Ascendant technology and how to dismantle it safely. The Sovereign One remained untouched, floating like a warning in orbit beyond Neptune, silent and dark. Months passed. Corrin and Mira returned to Earth for the first time in years. The cities were still intact, the people still alive, the children still laughing. But something had changed. A quiet shift in the way humanity looked up at the stars. They no longer looked for gods. They looked for themselves. Corin walked through a small archive museum in New Geneva, accompanied by Mira. The museum was new, dedicated to the truth behind the ascendants. It held artifacts, holograms, interviews, and a message he'd approved to be etched across the entrance. We were not the first, but we are the last, because we are not their legacy. We are our own. But not everyone was at peace. In a quiet corner of Luna's dark side, Mira met with a group of scholars and scientists. They were worried. They had studied the Ascendant memory core more deeply than they'd admitted publicly. And what they found wasn't just history. It was a warning. Mira sat in stunned silence as one of them explained. They didn't destroy themselves because of decay or collapse. They weren't afraid of rebellion. They were afraid of something else. Corin, standing behind her, leaned forward. Explain. The lead researcher gestured to the projection. This wasn't a clean cycle. It was a reaction, a containment strategy. Something drove them to erase themselves, to reset the species, to abandon all records and scatter into silence. Mira felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. What? The researcher swallowed. They called it the return, a cosmic event, a pattern repeating through time. Every intelligent species, when it reaches a certain point of awareness, they attract something. Not a being, not a race, something older, something outside. Corin stared. You're saying the Ascendants weren't running from themselves? They were running from what was coming for them. The room went quiet. Then the researcher finished with a whisper. And it always finds us again. Back on the Unity Prime, Corin stood at the window once more. The stars hadn't changed, but he had. He held the cube in his hand again, not with fear this time, but with understanding. Amarith hadn't left them a curse. She had left them a choice, to fight for their own survival, or to fold into what once failed, to climb beyond their own creators. He pressed the cube against the glass. A soft pulse blinked once, then went still. Corin turned to Mira. When it comes again, he said softly, we won't run. Mira nodded. We'll face it together. A final message was transmitted to all human colonies, sealed with the Admiral's authority. To those born after us, know this. The stars are not kind. The past is not pure. But humanity was never built to kneel. We were made in error, and we chose to live anyway. Far beyond Pluto's orbit, the Sovereign One drifted in silence. Inside, in its core, a dormant spark flickered once, not from human command, not from ascendant code, but from something else, something watching, something waiting. Because no matter how far humanity rose, the void always remembered, and the cycle had only just begun.